This is the story of White Boy Rick. This deserves more than a short. He became a police informant at the age of 14. When I was 14, I was climbing trees. He was selling drugs at 16 and 17, no school dances. He was shot by someone in his neighborhood at 17, and at 18, there weren't any gowns. There was just a lifer. He was busted for cocaine. He had bukus of cash on him, and he stashed the cocaine close to his grandmom's house. And a juvenile now, sentenced to life in prison in Detroit, Michigan. The facts, as he spends 30 years behind bars, you start to ask, what the hell? Yeah, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to click the bell to be notified when I release new content. I'm a musician. My single last time is top 20 at US Radio. He's behind bars for 30 years. So as this story of White Boy Rick, now Richard is his name, he is pinned White Boy Rick by the media. It just sticks. He's probably Scottish or Irish or Norwegian or something. I don't have any room to talk. He has spent so much time in prison. Murderers, rapists, violent offenders have been let out of prison before him by the parole board. It's absurd. And he has cooperated. I'll get to that. Now, law enforcement states he is aware that he's made mistakes. But White Boy Rick has been a vital asset, valuable asset to the Detroit, Michigan Police Department and law enforcement community. An FBI informant behind bars. They say he's done more to assist cops with drug dealers. Still, when he's been put up for parole, and he hadn't for 11 years for no reason whatsoever, he had been denied time and time again. Now, let's back up a little bit. When he was 17 years old, he was actually in the car that was pulled over by the police, and he had a clear bag with around $30,000 in it. He's now 47 years old. He did admit that the money, that cash that was on him that night, was given to him in exchange for cocaine. So Wersch said that he had run from the police when pulled over to his grandmother's garage where he had the cocaine hidden. He grabbed a box with 8 kilos and hid it actually under a porch a few streets away. Now, during this parole hearing, when he admits all this, he is apologizing to the parole board and saying he is a changed man. He absolutely despises drugs today more than anyone. Wersch admitted that the drugs that he sold 30 years ago quite possibly destroyed the lives of many individuals and community members in Detroit, Michigan. For that, he is extremely apologetic for. Now, in 2005, Wersch was running a stolen car ring behind bars. He introduced his sister to a used car dealer in Miami. And Wersch's sister ended up reselling the stolen cars. Wersch's mom bought a stolen car. Wersch's sister ended up buying a stolen car. Now, Wersch ended up pleading guilty to the 2 felonies, and his mom and his sister were not charged. He did say that it was a big mistake. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he was like, you know what? I'm helping the law enforcement community. I'm answering all their questions, and you guys aren't throwing me a bone, so I'm going to make some money. By the way, when this latest parole hearing was happening, an FBI agent, retired agent at that, Greg Schwartz, was outside, and he was so frustrated in support of White Boy Rick because he was like, not only was Wersch recruited and paid by police and FBI as a 14-year-old 8th grader to buy drugs while in prison, he was a super important and major key to a sting operation that led to dozens of arrests. This retired FBI agent calls Wersch the single most important informant. He literally had the safety of undercover agents in the palm of his hand. He always did the right thing. And this retired agent was at the hearing. He wanted to support him. He wanted to let them know that Wersch helped law enforcement. Now, Wersch was also in the witness protection program, and he cooperated on a number of matters involving a major crime figure in New York. During this parole hearing, he was saying, if released, I would stay out of trouble. All I can give you is my word. I will never commit another crime. If you do not want to believe me, I understand. I am a criminal. All I can give you is my word as a man. If you did not know this, Wersch, he has served more than any other non-violent juvenile in history. More time, that is. He's not intimidating. He is not a scary figure. Even though he dropped out of school, he is extremely intelligent. You can tell. He dropped out in the 9th grade, by the way. He has a hard time saying no to people. And when police asked him to help out, at 14 years old, to bust drug dealers, he was all in. A skinny kid, knobby hair. He was arrested for selling 8 kilos. The media gave him this nickname of White Boy Rick, and it stuck. A judge sent him to prison for life without parole. While in prison, he was convicted of partaking in this stolen car ring, and he was willing to make up for it by turning in some of Detroit's most notorious drug dealers and bad guys. By the way, the Michigan Constitution no longer allows sentences without parole for minors arrested on drug charges. In other words, you can't send someone to jail for life for something like this, and Rick is still there. So I guess the law doesn't apply to him now? I don't know. He's now 47 years old. 29 years have passed. It is unheard of for non-violent juvenile offenders. And I keep saying this, but it's even more bizarre because Rick, he's cooperated with police. Every time he's provided information that's resulted in the conviction of tons of corrupt police officers. He's worked with the FBI. That's turned in Wersch's information into new arrests. I mean, he said Wersch should have been thanked by the Michigan Parole Board, and he should have been released from prison forever ago. This FBI agent was so frustrated because he was quoted saying, "What do you have against the kid that was 17, has spent seriously half of his life behind bars? What do you have?" He says, "You should have gotten the key to the damn city of Detroit." When you're talking to Wersch, he does not sound paranoid. He's simply confused. I would be too. I'd be like, what? I've done everything that you've asked. He cannot figure out what's keeping him locked up for so long. The government is convincing him that they're going to do everything that they can for him to get him out. And you don't know how much he's been told that. He does not understand why nothing has happened. He's been promised that we will get you a parole hearing now. Wersch says that the same parole board that has released dozens of rapists, murderers, and drug lords, they refuse to let him out. Still, I think it's probably because he's helped police go after powerful people, including police, members, a lot of people bigger than him. He's given information that's led to the arrest of Coleman Young, the former mayor's bodyguard, his favorite bodyguard, Jimmy Harris. Brother-in-law Billy Olson and niece Kathy Wilson were all arrested due to White Boy Rick's cooperation. He was extremely upset with White Boy Rick. White Boy Rick was called a stool pigeon for cooperating, for helping get one of his favorites arrested. He got in so much trouble by higher-ups for turning in corrupt cops. I mean, wouldn't that be the thing to do? It's like, if these people are supposed to be taken care of, instead they're messing up the community even more by their selfish acts, then of course they need to be turned in. And to add to that, you'd think that any mayor would be just thrilled that corrupt cops are getting taken out and put into prison for what they're doing. It makes the mayor look good. White Boy Rick even provided information on an individual, a homicide boss who appeared in the Eddie Murphy movie, Beverly Hills Cops, by the way. Wersch said that he heard this phone conversation where the drug dealer who's responsible for shooting a 12-year-old kid called this guy, Gil, to ask for help. Now, Gil said on this same conversation that he had it all under control and not to worry. Now, Gil had never been arrested. He was investigated but not charged. Now, Gil was quoted in the press saying that Wersch is a liar. Of course he is. Everyone says he is because he's turning in people of authority or of notoriety. It's absurd. There's no doubt that it's related to Wersch's cooperation about Gil and police corruption in Detroit, all of these individuals, that he cannot get this parole hearing. Now, Wersch, if that's not enough to get cooperation from law enforcement higher-ups to get this guy out, I mean, vindicate this man after all. I almost said a bad word. Wersch, he was also helping the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Mike Duncan was the prosecutor at the time. Then Mike went on to become the Attorney General. He was assigned to find out what Wersch knew about the same order that gave Gil freedom, meaning that gave Gil Hill this investigation, this shoddy one at that, and then covering it up or saying that he did nothing, had no wrongdoing, when Wersch said, hey, I heard him on the phone. I have evidence to say otherwise. Now, the parole hearing that he got in 2003, the promises that I was previously talking about to help get him out of prison, they were broken. Of course they were broken. So they are just befuddled. Wayne County Prosecutor Mike Duncan wrote a scathing letter. Now, this is the same Mike Duncan that was at the prosecutor's office, Wayne County, and was being helped, who then became mayor, who then became attorney general, and now all of a sudden he's writing a scathing letter. He rescinded his regulation for release, meaning this gentleman is now saying, don't release this guy. It doesn't make sense. What does this dude know? Who has he messed with to keep him behind bars? Of course, the parole board denies his release. And for 11 straight years, like I touched on, he's been refused any additional parole hearings. There has to be someone or something that's keeping him in prison. It's definitely not the crime that he committed at 17 and 18. It's not the crime behind bars he committed. Everything about that should have been wiped, washed. Now, Wersch's attorney wants an investigation into the parole board. He's asking the federal courts to intervene. He does not know who would still want Wersch in prison. It's the million-dollar question. Rick Wersch, he was arrested by the cops. He was working for the cops. He was helping the cops. He was cleaning up the cops. He was cleaning up the city. He was doing all he could to support. And yet here he sits. Different ways that he would cooperate. They would come and visit him in prison. They would show him pictures, and they would ask who this person was or who that person was. And Wersch would identify them. He would tell them who they were. The police officers, the law enforcement would leave and say they would be in touch. The relationship grew. It would turn into them setting into houses to purchase drugs and stuff like that. Like, he would tell them where to go to get these drugs, to get these drug dealers off the streets. They would show up, the drug dealers too. They would make the deal. Arrests would be made, all because Wersch was helping. They would leave. They would come back. They would need help. They would leave. And another one was a really big case involving a trip to Vegas for a fight. Wersch gave them all the information. Of course, they buy plane tickets. Of course, it unfolds the way in which Wersch told them it would. They'd make their bust and nothing. Crickets. Again, for months. It's unconscionable. It's like give, and all they do are take. And not only that, it's like they're keeping him in the cage in prison so that they could just use him. Because if he's out, they won't necessarily be able to find him to then use him. So it's almost like they're protecting their most valuable resource, punishing him, though. It's asinine. Now, Robert Gary, who is a retired police officer, he actually served on the parole board. He can't figure out why violent offenders are getting out of prison and Wersch is not. Now, Gary was quoted saying that he had released people who are armed robbers and some who have committed murder. So why not Wersch? Keep in mind, there is a single drug charge and a single car case. Non-violent crimes. They have him locked up. It's cruel. It's unusual punishment. Now, this retired officer, Gary, he voted to have him released. It made sense. There was no reason in this world that he, Wersch, should still be there. There's currently 10 members on the parole board. We went to public and told cameras they're not allowed. The members of the parole board, by the way, they're paid $100,000 a year. They are appointed. And retired officer Gary insisted on another vote after his vote, right? Now, the board voted not to allow him to have another public hearing. So everything would then have to be private if another hearing would happen. Now, in 2012, board member Barbara Sampson refused to give him a hearing altogether. She said, we'll take another look in 2017. Wersch has sat and sat and sat longer than any other nonviolent offender in the history of the United States. The cost to taxpayers, possibly and around $800,000. Hollywood, all around this story. I would be too. I mean, it's absurd. It doesn't even make sense. It's the age-old. What do you think of this? Let me know in the comments below. Sure, he did the crime at 17. Life in prison? Okay, let's say he did the crime, 8 kilos of cocaine. I get it. I believe that drugs are very dangerous and hurt people. I agree. He should serve. Let's say he did get life in prison, but he's helped so many very violent people, very corrupt people get put away. He's helped law enforcement. So I think that should account for something. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that this dude should be out? There should be a movie. There should be 10 movies about this. This should be a series. This should be like Rambo 70. There is so much to this. I might get off for even making this video. Please don't kill me. One of the cool things is Wersch has developed a relationship with Kid Rock. I mean, if anything good comes of this, why not have some famous musician friends to help keep you not only company, but your spirits up? He does have an attorney who is extremely supportive of him, and you can hear by previous stories in this video that there are former law enforcement, former FBI, former individuals in high-sitting positions who too believe in him and his release. I guess it doesn't help that there was a former mayor that he helped put behind bars for 20 years for racketeering by his information given. So, of course, these higher-ups are probably super pissed, but wouldn't it be in their best interest to get him out of prison? Maybe he does go on the run and law enforcement can't find him, and then that'll be better so all their friends who are collecting checks and doing shitty things, they don't get caught and they can keep being terrible human beings, and you don't have to pout because you've always gotten your way, and everybody's happy. Now, the irony, by the way, former Mayor Kilpatrick, who he got put away for 20 years, they ended up in the same prison. Yeah, and they chatted often. He was right next to former mayor when he was receiving a phone call on racketeering charges. Now, as soon as Wersch heard the phone call in, he said he was pale at best. This is former mayor. 30 years, 3 decades, behind bars, cooperating, helping, doing all he can to make good, serve his penance for something that happened when he was 17 and 18 because he was approached by the FBI to help them. He's been helping for 30 years, and still he helps behind bars, putting people away, the same people that won't help him get out. Be sure to follow for more funerals and music. There's nothing about this video that's funeral related, I know, but when you're in the funeral profession, you got to have some sort of outlet. I love podcasts like mine, You'll Die Trying, or I love music. I love creating music, like my single that's top 20 at radio nationwide. Yeah, it's all in the description below. And be sure to subscribe. I already said that. We'll see you at the next one. Poor white boy Rick. I want to meet him. I mean, he ain't a friend of Kid Rock's a friend of mine.